We're reporting on what you can see is clearly a breaking point in the use of federal force over the weekend. And I'm going to just show you some key moments here, and you can see with your own eyes what it looks like to be patrolled in America under the Trump administration right now. President Trump is radically expanding the use of military-style, militarized, and sometimes actual military patrols. These are new images. You can see federal agents in tactical gear in Portland, Oregon, brandishing their crowd control rifles and their gas masks. There was a smoke grenade deployed. You can see that there. It's outside an ICE detention facility in Chicago. We saw federal agents using tear gas. And that wasn't being used for, say, an immigration raid alone or for, say, public safety. There are times where lawful use of those methods can be for the public safety. But much of this on screen with these images was to counter the public reaction from protesters, including American citizens, exercising their rights against this. What you see. This is America over the weekend. And there's a lot going on, and we'll get into it. And if you watch this program, you know we cover a lot of different things. But if you lived on that block or in that community, you can imagine what a big deal it is. If you're in some other part of the country or a red state that's not getting this kind of treatment, maybe you're less aware of it. But this is the news. We saw one agent seen with a tear gas launcher. These federal forces under Trump are also clearly girded and ready for escalation. You got to pack those type of weapons to then be ready to use them. The AP, nonpartisan outlet, reporting just the facts that the Trump administration has helicopters and chemical agents ready to go as immigration agents are increasingly, quote, aggressive in Chicago. They also ran a, quote, military-style raid, which landed a helicopter. There were windows cracked, doors broken down. I'm showing you this because this is what's happening. It's an escalation of, quote, aggressive, as the AP put it, military tactics ordered by President Trump in our American cities. And much of it is blatantly partisan targeting. So you can have one debate about the use of force and how far to go. Then you have another debate about whether this is the use of force for all places in the country. That wouldn't make it okay, it would make it uniform. Or whether things are so politicized and that's getting so normalized that the president has these kind of aggressive tactics with the launchers I showed you here in places that he perceives as his opposition and something else there in places he perceives as his support, which is, according to the Constitution, an un-American view, when we are all equal before the law. The president using the feds in the places that voted against him, and thus trying to override what has been largely Democratic governors pushing back against this. And he's tried to pull in guard troops from other states in a highly unusual bid to do an end run around some of the restrictions that protect your rights. Judges have rejected or narrowed some of these efforts when tested in the courts, rulings admonishing the president for treating America like a war zone and for treating you, American citizens, like some sort of foreign threat. Now, that is becoming quite literal, because I can tell you they're not stopping at the images I just showed you. There is now discussion in the military among Pentagon brass and the generals about using the Army's 82nd Airborne, deploying that here at home. It's an infantry division that is typically, as one report put it, for combat zones. Indeed, that is where it was used in both World Wars, Vietnam and Afghanistan. You see what's happening? It's not about whether you agreed with Trump or voted for Trump. This is not normal, and the public knows it. We're talking about footage of war zones, because if I go to find, and our producers and journalists find, well, where do we get a picture or an image or video of the 82nd Infantry? You're going to get video from past wars, because that's when any other president in either party ever used it. The public is not okay with this. One example, I showed you the photos of the force. We also saw protesters out, many of them peaceful. One holding this sign, pleading with us to see it, and I will say this protester is seen. I showed you the ICE agents. I showed you federal forces. I'm also going to show you people standing up. The protester telling the nation this message: your humanity is more important than your orders are. That might apply to people directly inside the government who, of course, have orders from the president. But lately, with this kind of president, that could apply to people on college campuses or in media organizations where the president is trying to issue orders and see who will fall in line. Remember, some of the largest Trump protests are about this exact abuse of power. No kings, no military rule. There are other things that has made Trump unpopular. We can get into those. But the big no kings protests were about this type of abuse of power and how this can correlate with attacks on democracy and elections themselves. The nonpartisan outlet Politico reports, as a matter of fact, not criticism, that it's become clear the president hopes to normalize the use of the military on American streets to quell protests and enforce his policy agenda. That's not what the military is for. The pushback continues. The Democratic governor of Illinois speaking out.
U.S. citizens, including children, have been traumatized and detained. This escalation of violence is targeted and intentional and premeditated. The Trump administration is following a playbook: cause chaos, create fear and confusion, make it seem like peaceful protesters are a mob. He wants to justify and normalize the presence of armed soldiers under his direct command.
This is happening here. Now, I mentioned the laws against this. The military is legally restricted from patrolling American citizens. And the president at times has seemed to flout that, other times has rooted this in what are potentially lawful goals. ICE enforcement, immigration enforcement, those are valid federal powers, but not when used as a pretext only in parts of the country. We have immigration issues, for example, across many border states, Texas among them. Chicago is not the only place. And so there's going to be potentially a larger reckoning over whether this is a real thing or normalizing the abuse of power thing. The rulings against this are important because they're testing what they can get away with. In the new clashes, we can report that tonight, Illinois, Oregon, and California are taking Trump to court, trying to stop them from sending these guard troops across different state lines as the end run. A federal judge ruled this week that we still are a nation of constitutional law, not martial law, and warning against blurring the line between the civil and military federal power to the detriment of this nation. That judge blocked Trump a second time. Politico's headline: Judge blocks Trump's National Guard deployment in Portland for a second time because of the loophole effort to get around the first blockage by moving these troops from one state to another. People often ask, when will we have a constitutional crisis? Will it be clear? Will it be like the Saturday Night Massacre under Nixon or some earlier periods of history, whatever you want to pull from? But you have to remember, some crises don't happen in a dramatic single moment. Sometimes they happen slowly over time until you look up and you say, why are there so many militarized people or actual soldiers or the 82nd Infantry patrolling my line to the polls in the midterms? And by then, if you want to go to court and stop it, it may be too late. I want to bring in Reverend Al Sharpton, the host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC, founder of the National Action Network, and among other things, an expert on the long struggle for voting rights in this country, which is relevant to these federal powers, and Molly Jong-Fast, an MSNBC analyst, and we can note tonight now a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. Congrats to you on that media news.
Thank you.
Great to have you both here. Rev, I'll start with you. This type of federal power being used in these certain places tells you what about where we are in watching the autocratic risk tonight?
Well, we are very close to an autocracy if we're not there. When you see this kind of force being used, military style, on U.S. citizens under the guise of we're going after illegal immigrants, and when you see the policies that are side by side with it, it is a cause for us to hit the alarm button in this country for democracy. When we see this president put tariffs on China at 145 and then bails out Argentina, and then what he did was break some of the farmers that voted for him that were depending on selling soybeans to China. And then Argentina took the bailout money and started selling soybeans to China. So there's not even a rhyme or reason to what he's doing. It's brute force, and it's on American citizens. Kids dragged out in Chicago putting zip bags. This is unbelievable, and it's un-American.
And Molly, you get the feeling that he's not doing it everywhere because there's a heck of a lot of places that wouldn't like it.
And if you listen to that Pritzker press conference today, he talks about why is Donald Trump targeting Illinois? And he also talked about, I mean, the thing that was so striking about that press conference is somebody was killed. You know, Pritzker was talking about this. They have not gotten good answers from ICE. And I think it is really scary. The one thing that gives me a little bit of, I don't want to say hope, but a little bit of hope, is that you see these Democratic AGs and Democratic governors pushing back, documenting everything. And what Pritzker said yesterday, or a couple days ago, which I think was so important, was he said, stay peaceful and document everything. You have a cell phone. You have a video. You have a lot of power in that cell phone.
Okay, so what you saw wasn't just another news report. It was a methodical, step-by-step autopsy of a constitutional crisis happening in slow motion. Melber laid out the case perfectly. Let's cut right to the core of it. The single most revealing part of the whole thing is the targeting. These military-style raids aren't happening everywhere. They're happening in Portland and Chicago. They're not happening in red states with similar issues, in fact worse issues. That's the tell. That's how you know with absolute certainty that this has nothing to do with uniform law enforcement and everything to do with political intimidation. It's a weapon being aimed exclusively at political opponents. And the most terrifying part of that whole breakdown, the mention of the 82nd Airborne. Let's be crystal clear, that is an active duty combat infantry division designed to fight foreign wars. The legal wall separating the US military from the domestic police forces, the Posse Comitatus Act, is one of the bedrock principles of the USA. Trump's team isn't just pushing the boundaries, they're actively looking for ways to bulldoze that wall entirely. And this is the slow normalization that Melber warned about. An event like this happens once. It's a shocking scandal. It happens a dozen times, and it starts to become background noise. Then, as he said, you look up during an election, and there are soldiers patrolling your line to the polls, and by then it's too late. What we are watching isn't just a response to protests, it's a dress rehearsal for full-blown autocracy. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.